Hey, you guys. Hi. Hey, Christoph and hey, T King. I know I saw you guys were waiting. Oh my goodness. I've been having the worst time of it the last couple days because my walking is bad. And I just felt like, you know what, for like 3 or 4 days now. If you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tidkemeyer. I wrote for Pathos, a column called No Longer Quivering for almost 10 years. Hey, real. And now I just kind of do my own thing here on YouTube. Sometimes I talk about religion. Most of the time, it's just whatever weird thing gets stuck in the old brain is what I talk about. Real, I hope you're having a good day. So, anyway, last couple days, bad walking, falling down, falling down, falling down. And what do I mean by bad walking and falling down? The last 2 days, when I've gotten the pool to do my swimming, walking, well, I couldn't swim because my balance was crazy and I was like in, out. And the walking was problematic in the pool. I had to hang on to a pool noodle like I was pushing a shopping cart. So, hey, Angel Baby. So it is what it is. And the other thing that I don't ever do this if you're having balance issues. I tried to lay out a quilt yesterday at California King for this that I was spinning and falling down, kneeling, falling down. Just, I'm going to have to start wrapping myself in bubble wrap, I guess. So one of the things I did after I finally got my quilt together and started quilting was I started watching Tiger King. How many of you out there watch that? I watched. Oh yeah, hit the like button, do all the YouTubey things, subscribe if you want to, even if you're hate watching. And I know I have a few hate watchers. Hey, hate watchers, because I know that you are a couple of you. Um, Real, I have a cane. Here's the thing: the cane plus the pool is not a good combo. It just doesn't work. I'm thinking about getting a three-wheeled walker to push because my issue is balance. If I could hang on to something with both hands like a shopping cart, even though I'm not leaning on it for balance, I'm not supporting myself. Just the action of doing like this does something to the balance. So I'm getting one of those. Never heard of Tiger King. Well, Cheryl, you have a walker, real? I'm getting ready to get one myself because I've got so much damage from the last stroke I had that being able to walk without assistance is going to be problematic for me. Real, I'm sorry you have gout. I hope you feel better with that. I know that comes and goes. So, Tiger King. Tiger King was this crazy show that was on Netflix right when the pandemic lockdown started. So, everybody and their brother watched it. It's about a guy named Joe Exotic that had a roadside zoo. And where it was really problematic for me was like I first started watching it, I was like, I can't watch this because of the way they were treating the animals. Because if you know anything about me, you know I have 10 trillion strays I feed here, and I try to snatch them up and do various things at the vet for them. Oh, so I also used to volunteer at the sanctuary here, but now that I can't walk easily, it's more problematic. I go in there when they need extra hands to feed the babies, to hand feed the babies. That's it now. And occasionally to socialize the parents, but I barely go in there at all anymore. And I'm sorry because I really enjoy it. I'm one of the very few people who hasn't seen Tiger King. For what I've heard about it, no interest. John, I thought that too. And then after I got over the fact that Joe Exotic was feeding his caged tigers and lions expired meats from Walmart, he was getting out of the dumpster. He was feeding that to the animals. And I can tell you, if you have not even exotic animals, unexotic animals like my 5 trillion cats, I don't try to feed them expired meats from anywhere. It behooves you to actually feed them what the thing is that they do the best with. I went through that with my cat, Stinky. I had a hard time with him finding what the right combo was to make him grow, but I was able to do it. This is why I never liked circuses because of the treatment animals. Same, Angel. I just can't. So I went back and finally watched it after getting over my repugnance over the way they treated the animals. And all I can say is everybody connected with that production was crazy. The only ones that I didn't think were just totally nuts were some of the workers seemed pretty grounded to me, like Safi, who they show her getting her arm bitten off by one of the tigers. Ugh. So I wasn't impressed when I came away from it, but I was intrigued because of one thing, the Carol Baskin disappearance of her husband. To me, that was just utterly fascinating because he had bought land near, of course, I got to call it up now, and I can't even think of the name of the place. Bagasis, Costa Rica, Costa Rica. It's just south of Liberia. Liberia is where I go frequently. I go there shopping. It's about an hour away. It's a big city. It's modern. They've got all kinds of stuff there. I love going to Liberia once or twice a month, just to stock up on supplies. They have a Walmart. They have a Price Mart, which is the same thing as Costco. My dad had one of those rolling walkers with brakes and a built-in seat with the baskets. Like, I'm gonna have to get one of those. That's what I'm trying to do. Is I've got to order that next time I go to the States. That and a shower bench, a good, nice bamboo one I was looking at that's rubberized, because the one I got ain't worth a damn. It's just plastic, and it's hard if you need it. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to have to do. So anyway, Carol Baskin was married to this guy. Oh, Don. And Don mysteriously vanished. He was a millionaire. Don Lewis. He was very wealthy. He owned the land in Bagasis, and he was going to open he wanted to do a big cat rescue there. So he kept saying that he was going to move there, and Carol claimed after he disappeared that he moved there. But Joe Exotic from the show, that's what I'm getting, John, and that's exactly where I'm getting it from. She kept telling everybody when he disappeared that he'd just flown off in his private airplane to Costa Rica. The Costa Rican authorities said no such thing ever happened. There was no trace of him in Costa Rica. And yeah, I thought that was interesting because, like I said, I've been to Bagasis quite a few times. There's a wonderful waterfall there. If you ever come to this part of the world, there's a waterfall in Bagasis. The first exit before you actually get to Bagasis, off of Rutas Uno, which is the Panamanian highway that goes all the way from the States all the way down. You can follow it, Route 1. So she was saying all the stuff about that. Joe Exotic said that she murdered him and fed his remains to her tigers by covering with sardine oil. I don't know about all that. I don't know if Carol Baskin has actually done that or what the deal is. But here's the thing. Here we are 20 some odd years later, and there's no trace of him. So I was eager to watch Tiger King 2, and I watched the first 2 episodes. It brought the same level of crazy, but instead of focusing on the animals this time, it was focusing on the crazy people connected to it and what's happened. The first episode, I just laughed because all these people who were connected to the show were now famous. And I laughed because Joe Exotic said he was trailer park famous. I think some of the other people on the show, that might have been a good description. And so they were going around kissing these opening banks, just silly things, cutting the ribbon. I thought, well, good for them. They've managed to make their little 15 minutes of fame stretch out a few more minutes. Well, and then I got to episode 2, which was all about the disappearance of Carol Baskin's husband. Hey, Cheryl. And they were trying to say that because he had disappeared in Costa Rica. And I was really interested in that because, like I said, I've lived here almost 5 years now, more than 4, almost 5 at this point. And all I can say is If he had done that in the 70s or 80s, it would have been really easy to disappear here. Very easy. They interviewed a bunch of Costa Ricans that I was watching them, watching their body language, and knowing what Costa Ricans are like and what their levels of, how can I put this kindly, their levels of truth telling is. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to call anyone a liar, but let's say they're not the most truthful in how they approach things. This one man swore up and down that John was flying back and forth quite a bit and landing on the banana strips. If you don't know what a banana strip is, it's a small airport that's not really anything else. I'm not sure that even back then that there were that many banana strips. Right now, you couldn't do that. You'd have to land it in the field somewhere, and radar would pick you up, and it would be a problem, I think, because there are tiny airports dotted all over Costa Rica. And if you're like me and you say, "Oh crap, I got to go down to Uvita, and I don't want to take that 7 or 8 hour drive," you pay your $80, you hop on Sansa or what's the other airline? Aerojet, something like that, and you're down there. I've taken Aerojet back and forth to San Jose a number of times because it's a 5 hour drive. And if it's something to do with medical and I'm already upset, I really don't want to be driving. So they talked to this guy in San Jose. Keep in mind, San Jose is a good 5 hours from this place that supposedly Don Lewis bought. And she said he disappeared too. I watched this Tico. Hey, Cheryl, my mind is gone. Talk about John Lewis bringing down giant cardboard boxes of cash with clothing on top. How he did all these things that were squishy and suspicious, and he bought all this property, but he didn't buy the property. He put the property in this Tico's name, which is not unheard of. I've seen that happen here. Let me tell you something. If you ever come here and you buy property in a Tico's name instead of yours because you're trying to avoid some tax situation or whatever, guess what? That never works out well. Eventually, the IRS figures out you've done this. And if you put it in the Tico's name, they run away with the profits. This guy was talking about that. So he was talking big time about how he bought all this stuff. And then he said a CIA operative he knew in San Jose warned him away from Don Lewis. And that may be, but I'm just going to say that Tico I do not trust at all. The other Ticos that were interviewed that were only able to speak in Spanish, I think most of them were pretty truth-telling. But the main guy was saying that he thought that John had used some of his money to get a fake Costa Rican passport in another name, and that Don had just completely disappeared into Costa Rica. Well, I know some Americans, a few Americans that have been here so long, they no longer have an American passport and they aren't here legally. They don't have a valid driver's license or anything else. They got hither and yon. I've seen that here. There are some people that do that. There is just this place that Americans think they can come here and just ignore all known laws of decency, criminality, or whatever. I mean, I see this quite frequently here. And who knows if Don Lewis is down here? I don't think he is. The Costa Rican government has exhaustively searched for him here, and there's no evidence. And this particular Tico had to admit that he didn't even know if Don was down here on his fake passport or not. All I can say is it's going to be a mystery. I was disgusted to see how many people had gone real life on Carol Baskins. I don't know if she killed her husband or not. I don't know enough about it to make that informed decision. But the number of people that have been harassing her since this special came out is rather mind-boggling. And the ones reaching out to Joe Exotic in prison and reaching out to this one or that one, it just kind of blows my mind. It says something deeply disturbing to me about what's going on in the States right now. I just don't get it. I do not get it why they are going this way hard after her and believing him. And he's been proven many times to be something of a storyteller, fableizer. He comes up with these different things, and who knows? I think the tigers got him, in my opinion. Julianne, they may have. And, if they seized her grinder and looked for human DNA on it, I mean, there's no telling. There's literally no telling. There's some of these things, disappearances and murders, there's just no way to know. And I'm kind of sad that everybody seems to be going real life on her. That's just going to make her dig her heels in even more. But they've investigated this thing pretty exhaustively and not come up with for sure what happened. It's nuts. So many people behave as though accusation equals guilty, regardless of any proof or lack thereof. John, yeah, exactly. And like I said, the fascinating thing to me about the Tiger King thing is not the tigers and the exotic animals, except, like I said, I'm horrified at the treatment of them. It's the people. I mean, there are just so many different weird personality types in that show. And I'll give Joe Exotic one good thing. He hired a lot of ex-cons. And that's a positive thing because ex-cons always have a hard time finding work when they get out. Nobody wants to hire the ex-con. I understand it and I don't understand it. If somebody it's not a violent offense, why on earth would you not hire them and give them a chance? Unless it's something like working at a bank and they're a bank robber, then obviously you would not want to do that at all. But I think, to me, just looking at this seems to be some sort of mass hysteria going on in the U.S. that this really tapped into the zeitgeist of the time. It really did. Now, it's kind of interesting. There is a animal sanctuary now on that property, but it's not Don Lewis. It's an American, but it's not Don Lewis that runs the place. So who knows? Who knows? He wasn't a young man at the time. He was in his 60s, like I am now, and he may have died of God knows what and when even. It's been 20 some odd years. We're closing on 30 years in a couple of years, and I find it super positive too. He hired so many ex-criminals. They found a place and a purpose. Yes, Lexi, I really love that about him. He was putting into practice what really needs to happen in the U.S. with these guys coming out of jail. It's one thing I would like to see happen with the justice system. I would love to see them concentrate on healing the psychological ills of some of these people, teaching them, training them, rehabilitating and releasing with a support program in place of social workers and others to help them succeed. All you have to do is look at Love After Lockup, which I've got to say, it's my husband and I, it's our guilty pleasure. We watch it every Saturday morning. It's just a routine. Tomorrow morning, we'll watch it again. And one thing I have noticed, almost all these people that get out of jail from Love After Lockup end up back there. Last season, they had a woman named Rachel that had a husband named Doug. The charging documents just came down yesterday on Doug, and they were awful. They were him kidnapping a guy and torturing him because he somehow thought the guy had stolen his truck. And it was a kind of meth-fueled madness that I can just imagine happening. I mean, I always thought the guy was kind of, but how on earth can you find your way to be a productive citizen and to be part of community if no one will help you? And that is, to me, that's awful. And you have situations now where certain areas are criminalizing homelessness. And I was just watching a documentary earlier that was just released like a day or two ago by one of the British filmmakers about how now the people who are getting hit the hardest by the pandemic financially are the middle class. There's a huge amount of middle class people that are now homeless, that are sleeping in their cars, they're going from shelter to shelter, or they're going into these not very safe fly-by-night hotels. And they were talking to people in the Orlando area, and it's really sad because There is a lot of times that I've seen in the States a poverty to prison pipeline situation going on. And once you're in the system, it becomes harder and harder to escape. They hit you with financial charges for your own. Okay, the lyric kicked in. I'm drooling. um, the financial thing, they hit you with your expenses for being in jail. They hit you with fines and levies. They hit you with restitution. They hit you with all these different things that used to not be the part of the system at all. And there's so many places that run these prisons for profit that are doing everybody, including us taxpayers, a disservice. Wasn't he doing illegal stuff himself? That can't be good for folks trying to rebuild their lives. Belinda, yep, that's not good for people rebuilding their lives, unfortunately. And I think it takes help on the outside, too, to keep that from happening. Well, the pipeline is because there's a lot of for-profit prisons. I know that, Will, and that disgusts me. That's one of the first things we need to do is completely kick out the for-profit prison vendors and completely retool the entire experience to make it something that is transformative instead of punitive. That's one of my big passions. That was one of Obama's great things, was to abolish feds using money to for-profit prisons, which Trump tore that up over. Well, I know about that one too. And that's one thing. I'm not a big fan. I've been a couple times. And one of my trips to Costa Rica, they were here too. They were one town over from me. They were in Flamingo from where I was. And it was kind of funny because I watched, that's one of the few episodes I've watched, because when I was here, the media coverage, Tico media coverage, oh, Kardashians. And so they covered it extensively. So you're flipping through the channels, and Kardashians, news on every channel. I like the fact that Kim Kardashian has used her personal power that she's gained through being famous to champion the cause of prison reform. And before we threw Donald Trump in the mix, the Republicans and the Democrats were both on the same side about criminal justice reform. Then we got Trump. Now we got Kamala Harris, which I have a problem with her because she's way more law and order than I would ever think of anybody on that side of the aisle. So she's put a lot of people in jail. And prisons are full right now of people in jail for minor drug infractions. The Dutch take the abandoned buildings are ones lost to taxes, make apartments, and move the homeless in. They also have grants for those who can't pay for health insurance. Cheryl, that's really the way it needs to be handled, I think. For nonviolent crimes, why not assign them to rehab instead of prison? Yeah, I would like that, or some type of training program or something like that. It's weird that Kamala's parents were way to the left of her. Yeah, and she's way to the right of most everybody on the left. So it's kind of interesting to see all this. Cheryl, that's a really great idea that they're doing that. Some cities here in the U.S., I think Austin and was it Austin? Austin and Salt Lake City were taking abandoned places and doing that, and or building tiny home villages for the homeless. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take something like that to happen to end the homeless crisis. It's actually getting worse since this whole crazy pandemic thing has happened. It's gotten pretty bad here too, but unlike the states, the government has put some safeguards in place so that it's not quite as bad for the locals as it could have been. And here, that's one thing, I got to give you a little Costa Rican bit of info about renting here in case you come here to live. Rent for the first year. We didn't do that. We only rented for the first 6 months. 6 months of renting. And then when our landlord raised our rent illegally, rather than going to court and fighting her, we just said, let's buy a house. So we did. And it's worked out well for us. Well, anyway, If you come to Costa Rica and rent property, ask gringos all about where the best places are. They'll know, they'll be able to tell you, hey, don't rent from that person. And the other thing to keep in mind is they are not allowed to raise the rent more than 5% per year. And there's only a limited number of years they could do that. So they, was it 5%? Oh, don't quote me on that one. It's a small percentage they're allowed to raise the rent because, like, I was talking to the guys at the gas station the other day, and all the gas prices here are controlled by the government, central government. So I guess there's some socialism going on here. So I was asking the guys there. One of them was pointing out I needed to replace the tire, which I did. How much do you make an hour here? You know how much he makes an hour? He makes $3 an hour to pump gas and do a variety of other things that used to be you would have guys at the gas station just routinely do when I was a kid, I remember. But California needs to fix their taxes on housing. The loophole of inheriting houses that keeps their rates insanely low, have property values insane. Yeah, that is really, they need to do that. It's not a good situation, right? 100K a year people are living out of a car around San Fran. Well, I thought about that too, because it's certainly gone up from the years I would go visit San Francisco. And it's just insane. I mean, and look at the Los Angeles area. Some of the rents there are just crazy. I sold my house for almost 4 times what I paid for it. So there's that. There's some people on the streets, but very few, and they want to be there. Police don't rouse the poor. They take them to an agency to help them. Cheryl, that's really how that should be handled too. And there are some people going to want to do that. There's some people that actually like living in tents outside. I had a friend that was one of them for a while who was, quote, hobo. He liked to ride the rails in the old fashioned ways that everybody did, but even that is quite dangerous. And it's dangerous to be out there in the street among these guys. We bought our house a couple of years ago, and somehow our neighbor's house went for 3 times what we paid for ours. Well, I wonder about that too. The person who bought my house held it a year and turned around and sold it for 100,000 more than what we sold it for, which I thought, well, what we sold it for was highway robbery. I'm a renter who's lived in San Francisco 40 years, very, very messy and crazy pricey. Hitting on the keys, I don't know how you do it. And by the way, I watch your videos. I love your videos. I love to hear the piano music, even when it's a little kid piano music. It's lovely. It's very lovely. I wish I could play like that. But unfortunately, I'm one of those fumble fingers where I have to have sheet music in front of me and I have to practice the piece 100,000 times before I can do it. 87K versus 220K. That is just crazy. That is the crazy numbers. One of my kids bought a house this year in the greater DC area, just outside the Beltway, and she paid almost $500,000, and it was not as big as my house was. And it's 60 years old. I was really shocked. It's a beautiful house. Don't get me wrong. I like her house. The landscaping's nice. It was beautifully fixed up. But I remember thinking how my in-laws had a fit when their other son bought a house that was $200,000. Where I live, there are more services for homeless folks than actual homeless folks. It's ridiculous. It's funny because there's some communities that really embrace it and they have a lot of things, and then there are places where they just run them out. Where some places in Northern Virginia used to annoy me because any place that was flat concrete, they would put these special bumps up that prevented the homeless from spending the night there. And I thought that was like the cruelest thing ever. The neighbor has a connected garage, but still ours has a more finished basement. Well, I don't understand why property prices are that crazy. Now, we sold our house had some very nice extras because every time I fixed anything in the house or bought an appliances, I upgraded as high as I could afford it. Did you see the latest LA news of the homeless? It was insane. I have not. I haven't kept up with that. Like I said, I've watched a couple of documentaries on homelessness around Orlando because of how many Disney workers are sleeping in their cars or living in utter and abject poverty, while the park is paying them $7 an hour, which I'm not sure how they can get away with that because I thought the prevailing wage for minimum was like $10 an hour across the board. I haven't kept up with what it is. But, and the thing that's really scary to me about all, yeah, Disney is evil. They charge you hundreds of dollars to come into their theme park, to this unreal, clean, perfect world that does not exist anywhere in this world. And then they pay their employees sub minimum wage. I don't know how they get away with it, but they do. And now it's hit people in the middle class sector who've lost their jobs because of COVID, who are now having to work jobs at Disney for minimum wage, more or less than minimum wage. Reporters were dehumanized. Oh, I could just imagine. Well, I've seen it handled very insensitively, and just kind of blows my mind because they're humans, just like you and I. They bleed red. I'd like to see compassion helping these people. Here in Southern California, there are lots of homeless people, and the home prices and rents are crazy high. I know about that there. There have been times where my husband or myself have had job offers either in the NYC area or in the Los Angeles, San Francisco area, those areas. And we've turned it down once we looked at what it was going to cost us to live there. Right next to, well, that's a shocking, scary, horrible thing. There was a guy that lived at one of the homeless veterans shelters in Baltimore that I used to see every time I went to my appointments at Johns Hopkins Bayview. Johns Hopkins Bayview has a huge facility, and it houses the Allergy and Asthma Research Center. So I went there for a long, long time. For a while, I was doing occupational therapy there to learn how to breathe through an asthma attack. And I was going 3 times to Bayview Hospital right there. There was always the same homeless veteran that was living in one of the shelters. And I took to making sure that I had money and supplies for him every time I came through there. And I heard enough of his story to know that he came out of the military with serious complex PTSD and all sorts of mental going on, and was unable to hold a job. And he's told me he was getting a little tiny bit of a pension, and he was living in this shelter, and he was asking people coming off of I-95 for donations. And he was such a sweet fella. I couldn't believe that people were treating him so uncompassionately. I'm just going to come out and say it. One day I was talking to him, and there was a wreck right in front of us. It was like, whoa! He could have been squashed. It could have hit my car. And so we had quite the conversation about that one too. I don't know what the answer is for the homeless problems, the people coming out of prison, but I have to think we got to start with compassion from somewhere, especially when you factor in the possible mental illness and the addictions. I said yesterday, I don't entirely completely understand addiction because I've never had those kind of problems, but I know how prevalent they are, and I know how they wreck people's lives. They wreck families. It's the same thing with homelessness. I know that it has really wrecked a lot of people's lives. I read something about someone in California who bought a boat to live on, and with the mooring fees, the boat paid for itself in about 3 years compared to rental prices. I think that's probably a pretty smart thing. Yeah, and it is so sad, Cheryl P. Belinda Paul, we were homeless a few times when I was a kid, and people treat you like, yeah, it's totally dehumanizing. I think my mom's living on the streets at the moment. Rumor is anyway. Belinda, I'm so sorry about that. Nobody deserves that kind of treatment. I came pretty close to it myself after I left my first very short. My first husband, who I was married to a very short length of time. And I decided I left him with a suitcase under one arm and a baby under the other, and decided I would rather take my chances out there in the world. And even if I had to just rent a room in someone's house or live in a shelter, I decided it was better than what I was living with and what was going on there. So we've also got the domestic violence component mixed in with possible PTSD, mental issues, and substance abuse issues. I mean, it's like a complicated trifecta for people getting out of prison or people on the edge and homeless. So sad the powers that shouldn't be view us as cattle, as useful idiots they can use to fight their banks' wars. That's exactly right, Angel. That is exactly right. I'm not sure at all what's going to happen in this world. It's such a mess. And there's so many people that are fighting with each other and saying nasty things in person, online, whatever. And I don't think that benefits anybody. Not at all. It's just one of those things. And that's one of the things I like about Costa Rica. There are more safety nets here than there are in the States for the citizens and the residents. It's a beautiful place. It's warm all the time. I get to see monkeys in my yard and iguanas, huge iguanas. And I try to hire people and pay them U.S. wages when they work here for me because, like I said, I've gotten to the point where I can't mow the grass anymore. I'm definitely not gardening or any of that anymore. I do water my plants a couple times a week, but even that's kind of a challenge because it's hard to handle a hose or a giant watering can if you got your cane in your other hand. I love iguanas too. They are so cool. They have the most interesting things. We have a huge one that lives here. It's like a 5-footer who lives on star fruits and the papayas. When I first got here, I was fussing at him because I'd see him in the papaya tree with a big papaya in his mouth, scuttling down the tree. It's like, leave those papayas alone. Well, now I just let him have the papayas. Can't get them all. That's fine. And the other thing with the iguanas is I've learned not to let them around, not to try and make sure they're not around when the pool guys come, because they'll grab them up, cut off the head, and haul them off for soup. And I smelled the iguana soup they were trying to get me to eat some. It does not smell like something you want to eat. It smelled really gamey. It was like gumbo that had turned is what it smelled like. My husband had some and said it wasn't bad, but I'm not brave enough culinary wise to eat iguana right now. So, and that was the other thing that leads me to talk about Don Lewis and at Costa Rica. I've already explained the Tico time in the past and how they don't keep time here. And also the fact that Ticos work for very little money. They will tell you exactly what you want to hear, whether it's the truth or not, whenever you're dealing with one of them. So I have learned to factor all these things in when I'm doing whatever I need to do out there in the economy. It's their culture. I'm not going to change them. I don't need to change them. I'm not one of the ugly gringos that's going to show up and say, make the sand stop blowing. The wind is blowing sand into us, and we paid a lot of money for our vacation. I heard that one time. Yeah, kitten, I'm not sure I could do it either. That's why I was smelled it only because it was like, oh, I don't think so. And so I factor all that in when I'm dealing with businesses or locate or Ticos that are doing various things. And that's another thing why I don't think Don is here. Now they'll take your money and smile and tell you what you want to hear. And I think that was what was going on with the one English speaking Tico that was a tour guide translator, which is something a lot of them are here. They'll sidle up to you and say, hey, I'll help you do that for $10,000 or whatever. And Belinda, when they fall in the trees, guess what? It doesn't kill them. As soon as they defrost, they're fine. I know it sounds crazy, but that's iguanas. So Don Lewis, if he had gotten here, that's another thing about Ticos I've never talked about, and Americans here even. Except for San Jose, Costa Rica is a series of villages, even in extreme tourist town like Tamarindo. And like a small village, everybody talks. Everybody. If Don Lewis was here, somebody would have recognized him. With all the press there's been on the case of the years, somebody would have recognized him and turned him in for the money. The show brought up another troubling aspect about Don Lewis, him and teenagers. He apparently had a yen for young teenage girls. They tried to say that Costa Rica was number one for sex trafficking. While it's not the best place for that, I think there are places in Asia that are a lot, or in the Arabic world too, that have much higher rates than that here. The thing here is prostitution is legal. It's totally legal. So I don't know why he would have had to stoop to trying to get little girls as girlfriends. When I worked at a resort, I'd get chewed out for dumb stuff, like a cloudy day when somebody wanted to sunbathe on the beach. Titled Gringo. Yeah, that always makes me laugh when people complain about things that you have no control over. It's just crazy. Yeah, that is class privilege at its finest, like watching them chewing out the hotel here for the wind blowing. It's like it's January. There's no clouds. It's beautiful sunshine, and we get the papa the one place you're going on vacation like that that's exotic, and figure out what you need to do and what your bona fides are and are not. Because for me, the first time I came to Costa Rica, we stayed in Manuel Antonio. There's a huge park at Manuel Antonio, and that's where Hanks filmed his movie. Was it Castaway? Was the name of it? Where he had Wilson, the ball he was talking to. It was filmed at Manuel Antonio. It's a beautiful place there, very beautiful. If you ever go, get a guide. Get a guide. The guide will show you all kinds of stuff you will never notice on your own. So we went there for the first time. Manuel Antonio has a climate very similar to the climate I grew up with in Louisiana. Hot and sticky, humid, high humidity all the time. And I have, like I've said before, I have mast cell and bad asthma. So we got there, and the first night we were there, I had such a severe asthma attack because of the mold situation in the hotel that I actually had the thing happen to me that I'd gone to Johns Hopkins to learn how to breathe around. My vocal cord shut and I blacked out on a concrete pavement. So I gave myself some really exotic bruises. But it was the first time in ages that it happened, and it was the weather. It was the weather. I told my husband, I said, this cannot be. We cannot be in this. We can't move to this climate. And that's the great thing about Costa Rica. There's 10,000 microclimes. If I had to pick a place to live here solely based on climate and my asthma, it would have been up in the Tennis Grisha area, which is real close to the airport. Because the microclimate there, it was just the best climate for asthmatics. At the point where they seemed to realize how ridiculous they were being and walked away, no apology, of course. Sex work here is legal, much safer than police. Yeah. Cheryl, it's that way here too. The only ones that aren't, and they showed this in the show yesterday, they showed the off books girls, the girls that are on their own walking the streets of San Jose. I didn't even know those existed until July when I went to get my brain scanned to see if I had MS or what it was, and it turned out it was a thalamic stroke. That first night, we rolled through downtown San Jose. Let me tell you, San Jose is a mess. It is a mess of one-way streets and crazy street numberings, just all kinds of stuff. So we were there. and driving around through the downtown area trying to find our hotel, which was a lovely hotel in downtown. It was a Holiday Inn, but it was like something like 20 stories or something, and beautiful views. You could just had a 360 view of the surrounding mountains, the volcanoes, the whole thing. And so we were driving around downtown San Jose going, okay, here's a skyscraper next to a building that looks like it was built in the 1800s. It was just this weird disparity. And we saw prostitutes walking the streets for the first time ever in San Jose. And I just laughed when I saw that segment in Tiger King 2, episode 2 last night of the streetwalkers on the streets of San Jose. I was like, oh, yeah, I saw that back in July. Yeah, John, good answer for you telling them that you could, asking if you want to move the clouds or the sun. That's what it is. Most of the people that come here for tourists are fine, but every now and then I see some really entitled, crazy behaviors, and I just laugh because that's about all you could do. You're going to run into people with entitled behaviors. I don't care where you are and what you're doing. And they think they're better than everybody else. And that's really off-putting if you're down towards the bottom of the ladder. I remember when I was a struggling single mom living in a single room and going to college and everything else, how horribly I got treated by people. So I can just imagine how much worse that has all gotten. So I'm running out of oxygen, so I'm going to go ahead and go and leave you guys. Like I said, Tiger King 2 is an examination of the people involved in Tiger King 1 without showing any abuse of the animals. So I'm much happier with this season. And since I love to people watch and watch all kinds of weird people, it's a smorgasbord for me of crazy. Except I did want to point out how unlikely it was that what that one Tico was saying about John. And I'll see you tomorrow. We're doing another 2 or 3 chapters in Debbie Pearl's book, Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity, which Debbie completely misunderstands scientific studies done over many years. It makes crazy claims. She also writes in crazy stories about some of our favorites like Jill Rodriguez and others. So don't miss it. Tomorrow at 10:30, I'll be back and I'll have my book review. Okay, love you guys. Have a fabulous day. Enjoy yourself. Be true to yourself and love one another. Sounds silly, but it is what I'm thinking about and doing these days. Okay, see you later. Okay, bye.